Okay, so maybe I will ask Betty to take over. Betty is the CEO of AB5 Consulting and also the CEO of Pharma Charlie, as well as the founder of the ACCESS.SPACE Alliance. And I will leave now the panel to the hands of Betty.
On the panel that I'm sharing now, the panelists will be able to present their own slides during the session, and then there will be an opportunity for everyone to then discuss questions, and you are more than welcome to propose your questions through the Q&A box. So please for me to thank the sponsor for this session, which is SSTL. So as we kick off this session theme is space systems. The idea is that as we look around for the space, space in isolation doesn't mean anything. It works in an ecosystem. And this session is meant to look at a variety of topics that are relevant for the chain of players from the launcher side, because there's no space activity without space objects placed in space to the ones using it with the payloads and satellite systems. So therefore, I'm very pleased to kick off that session with Volodymyr Levikin, who's CEO and founder of Skyrora. It's a pleasure to have you here. You're the first system in the UK as a launch system, and you did a lot of testing last year in Scotland after 50 years of activities or known activities in Scotland. So you're at the forefront of the latest launches activity, and I'm very pleased to introduce you as a keynote speech. So please, Volodymyr, the floor is yours for around 8 minutes, and then we'll introduce the panelists. We're going to each do a small presentation, and then we can have all that discussion.
Okay, thank you very much. So you should now be able to see my screen.
That's right.
Right. So we, Skyrora, right, to remind, we are the rocket company based in Edinburgh in Scotland. We're about 3.5 years old. So we basically have a unique multiple vehicle program. So lots of products which we developed and manufacture and keep manufacturing. It's a range of our suborbital vehicles, which you can see here, which we did 5 launch of those suborbital vehicles so far. And today I would like, of course, focus on our orbital vehicle, which is right now in a full production. So what makes us unique technology-wise, right? There is a number of factors. First of all, we don't use any cryogenic, so we are not cryogenic. We use hydrogen peroxide oxidizers and our own synthetic fuel as rocket propellant, as a fuel, which is called kerosene. That is the rocket-grade kerosene we produce from unrecyclable plastic waste, which gave us obviously way easier and simpler design. Less requirements for the ground infrastructure, and all the system can be mobile and very easy to maintain and low cost. However, our key factor, I believe, is our 3-stage design, when the 3rd stage, as you can see here, can not only perform increase the performance of the vehicle, of the launch vehicle, however, it can operate a standalone spacecraft on orbit. So imagine this scenario when the 3rd stage, which is yellow here, and that is the 2nd stage, right, will be detached on orbit from the 2nd stage, and then it will execute its primary mission, which is, of course, deployment of satellites, which nowadays we can do up to 315 kilograms on 500 kilometers orbit. However, with the thanks to our design, then the secondary mission would be possible, when the 3rd stage itself can operate as a standalone spacecraft to do the missions like inspections of other satellites, deorbiting of faulty satellites, or correct the trajectory of satellites to increase their life cycle. So, which put us in the unique position to be able in the future to operate on both markets, which is basically launch servicing as a launch vehicle, which by itself will grow dramatically, and we all believe in this, which is the blue line here. However, the new market is in orbital services start to emerge, especially since more and more satellites will be on orbit, the services for the orbiting and maintaining the satellites on orbit will grow. So we in Skyrora in a position to be able to address and operate in both those markets in the future. In order to do this, of course, we need a strong team, which we have, right? It's over 150 people right now in the UK, in Ukraine, and in Europe, and we have extraordinary advisory board, which I'm sure all people here. So we also have, and we keep scaling up our production facilities. We're proud to say that we managed to do all the tech in-house, and we managed to achieve all the technological know-how and do this in-house. That is the way for us to decrease the cost dramatically. As for the launch, obviously we're in a good connections with all potential spaceports in Europe and particularly in Scotland. So our preferences, however, is the Shetland Isles and Spaceport 1 from Hebrides. And we have a vision to do the mobile launch, right? When the whole system will be based in the containers, and we will do similar orbital launch similar as we did the static firing test of our Skyrora suborbital biliquid vehicle, when the 8 lorries of containers swam up from Edinburgh to Highlands in Scotland, and it took us less than a day to set the first ever let's say launch complex in the UK, right? So that is our vision, how to make it cost effective, cheaper, not copy Americans' experience from 70s, but actually with the minimum footprint, minimum environmental impact, and make it happen. That's, I believe, the right fit for the UK. So to sum up, we're moving fast. Of course, it's difficult because it's a new emerging industry for the UK. However, we're doing quite a progress. So today I hope we will have a fruitful discussion how we can move faster as an industry and unite around the idea of sovereign independent orbital launch in the UK. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Volodymyr, for setting the scene, and I think it's very interesting and very exciting what you're bringing to the UK, and it brings a huge dynamic as well as opportunity. And we're going to discuss these opportunities with the 3 speakers we have on the panel with you two. And I would like to start introducing Alex da Silva Curiel. Alex has been with SSTL for over 30 years in various capacities and is currently the International Business Development Manager. Alex keeps close track of the small satellite market and is also the co-chair of the IAA Symposium on Small Satellites as part of the IAF conference. I'm also very pleased, and I would like thankful for SSTL to be the sponsor of this session. So Alex, if you can put your camera on and present your point. Thank you.
Thank you. I hope you can see the screen there and hear me okay.
Yeah.
Then we'll proceed. So yeah, Alex da Silva, I'm very pleased to be able to sponsor this conference. Thank you for inviting me to the panel. For those of you who don't know SSTL, there's probably not that many people, but we are a small sat specialist. We build, manufacture, operate small satellites, pretty much complete turnkey systems or any parts of that. We've been pleased to have recently launched our 70th spacecraft. So that was just a month ago or so. So going fast. And generally, as it says here, we do space quite differently. We are completely vertically integrated. We build and manufacture everything in our facilities, including payloads, spacecraft. We do operations ourselves. And of course, launch is one of the few things that we don't do ourselves. So it's very interesting to be on a panel with a lot of launcher teams. And then, because we have that full capability, we can license our capabilities as well. And so we are part of the Airbus Defence and Space Group, but branded as Surrey Satellite Technology Limited, as most people know as Surrey or SSTL. If we look at just the last 3 years, we launched around 24 satellites across 10 launches. Relevant here, it shows sort of the launch rate, and most of these spacecraft are in the microsatellite class. There's a few outliers. There are some CubeSat class missions, and there are some mini satellite class missions as well, as you can see here. Not going to go through all of these in detail here. And generally, what we do is provide satellite missions mostly for operators who want to run commercial services or governments who want to run operational services. So there's some examples here. This shows on the left-hand side sort of very high-resolution imaging, which we do from an operational constellation that we have deployed and we own and operate, but we lease the services from that system. From 4 satellites, 3 shown in the picture there, plus another one. But also we build constellations, we build LEOCOMs, bringing into use satellites, technology demonstrators and pilot missions to try out concepts. And also shown here is a video imaging mission, which is quite novel in a way. And we're still trying to exploit this type of capability, and radar imagery as well. But most of all, I think some interesting discussion points here. So there's a lot of new space activity in the last few years. What you can see here on the chart is the number of companies, new space companies being incorporated up to the rate of 100 a year in recent years. It's leveling off a little bit. And at the same time, if we look at financing, there has been around $30 billion spent in the last 5 to 10 years alone in these private space companies. And what are the drivers behind there? What you can see here is it's the big data analytics and communication. Those are really the short-term drivers in this. But also the investors can see that there's a longer-term benefit here, because in the end there is the exploration and space tourism, as we saw in the last session. So these companies become relevant in the longer term as well. If we now look at new space in general, we essentially have this sort of picture where we have the investors and clients that are underpinning the big data analytics companies and the broadband operators, who are underpinning the satellite manufacturers and the launch providers and ground network providers, who are then underpinning the technology companies. And so I'll leave it up to you, and maybe this becomes part of the discussion. Is this a house of cards or is this a brick wall? How solid is all of this? But essentially the point here is that this whole ecosystem, and mostly becoming a commercial ecosystem, is essentially supported by those key applications through those investors and clients. Some of those clients can be governments. So the 4 points I want to raise here really in the discussion is that there are several issues. Space debris, it's creating some opportunities as well as creating threats for both launch companies and space technology companies and operators. The fact that users are really looking for information or for a robust service. Increasingly, users are looking for something quite complex, but the markets are not very mature yet. So it is still very difficult to break through and to make a robust service work. And we haven't seen many services mature yet in this area. The next point is that a lot of these satellite systems are increasingly being interconnected. And I know there's some panels coming up on this. In the end, users want faster data return. That makes the business plans work. And so interconnecting via lasers, radio frequency, in-orbit connectivity, to the ground laser connectivity, all of this is coming in. But finally, I think the main point I wanted to make is that there's also a lot of hype and a lot of impatience with organizations. And often the things that we all say can easily be done turn out generally not to be so easy. Yes, it can all be done, but what is often forgotten is how much investment in both money and time it takes to make all these systems work. And so we are seeing that increasingly is that with the big organizations that have been sort of successful, you can see Planet out there, we're seeing Starlink being deployed. It seems all very easy. One of the things we're forgetting is how much is invested to make those systems actually successful. So I'll leave it at that and we can discuss further in the panel, I hope. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alex. I think it's a very interesting scene that you're setting with all the potential issues and elements that need to be taken into consideration. I'm sure it will raise questions from the audience. In the meantime, I would like to invite Andrew Maximov, who's the CEO of Precious Payload. Andrew is a serial entrepreneur and investor. At the age of 21, he co-founded a trading company to trade gold in Africa, but it failed. Then he co-founded a community exchange market, which successfully exited in 2014. And he sold his second venture by the age of 25 to a strategic partner, and is the co-founder in 2017 of Precious Payload, a software space tech startup developing the collaboration tool for the space industry. So Precious Payload builds an API SaaS software to help space entrepreneurs. So please, Andrew, the floor is yours if you want to put your screen on.
Sure. Thank you so much, Betty, for your kind introduction. So I hope, you can see my screen now. Let's go. So my message today would be addressed to those who are responsible for that type of ambitions. So we are mostly working with the startups that are entering the space industry at a very early stage. And my sort of invitational discussion would be around those space entrepreneurs who are responsible for that type of new space field. So first of all, a lot of us, think that now is the best time to start a space company. We can see that, measuring by a cost to launch 3 CubeSats that, throughout the life of the Precious Payload, we have seen the price drop from $50,000 US to less than $100,000 of the contract value to launch a 3 CubeSat. And of course, we can see that the investment space has increased. We've all seen this beautiful SPACs that went public, and now there's a lot of accredited investors and general public who can invest in the space sector. But what it really means and what we see in the market, we've been active for the last 4 years now, is that the reality for the Pathfinder missions, for those startups who are trying to build the business in the ecosystem, is that their Pathfinder mission usually takes 4 years to build from the idea to get to the successful mission. It takes them roughly $8 million US to do that. And yet their success rate for that technical mission is less than 40%. So what we see here, the angle that we see here is that because there has been so much investments put into the infrastructure and the hardware and the launch systems and everything, now we see that the actual cost of managing the mission and risk of managing the mission and picking the right supply chain becomes even greater than the cumulative cost of hardware and launch. And we can see that up to 80% of the engineering time in the team is spent on just managing the RFP process and then making the mission management happen for their supply chain. And we're talking about more than 20 suppliers that an average team manages over 27 months for their first mission. So what we the biggest lesson learned and what we convey to the startups that we work with is that there's a reason why we call it Precious Payload, because the payload is the essence, it's the core of your success as the company. And what we want our customers to focus on is getting the customer traction from day one. We want to focus them on increasing the TRL level of their center, their payloads, and really challenge them to adopt the best industry practices and not to reinvent the wheel every time they try to build the software, build the deployer, build the satellite, and come up with the business model, and really framing the roadmap of their business over the next 5 years from start. And the challenge that they face is, of course, the space industry is highly compliant and it has a lot of regulations. So dealing with all these NDAs, ERs, ITARs, the trade wars, the politics and nation barriers is really key to their success. So overcoming these challenges. Of course, when you're talking about the suppliers, there's unpredictable lead times. You don't know who is credible. You don't know their heritage. And there's really a lot of small niche providers overseas that they have to deal with. And of course, we're now living in a disconnected world where there's no offline events, so we have to rely on Zoom calls to essentially manage your satellite supply chain. And the solution that we came up with is we are creating a CRM for what we call a heavy sales cyber transactions that involve complex engineering. And what it involves is we build a system where the Pathfinder missions can select their templates for known mission architectures across all the domains here based on the application. We also support the young entrepreneurs by giving them the templates for multiple mission architectures. They can explore, hey, what if I go with a CubeSat? What if instead I want to use the hosted payload solution or the space as a service model? And they can then create a custom view, so like a subsection of their requirements, and share only what matters to their suppliers and get their feedback and their reply. And we have been successful in delivering that to over 14 companies now, and we work with more than 30 suppliers. And I invite to the discussion and to the audience, I invite to talk about what it takes today to manage your supply chain and pick your best supplier for your Pathfinder mission. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrew, for your presentation. What is interesting is that this session is also challenging the traditional models that we've seen in the past. So you're bringing also that dimension to the discussions. The last speaker for this session that I would like to introduce and give the opportunity to provide a small presentation is Alan Webb. Alan is Managing Director of CST, who is well known for as a broker or broker agency for the launcher side. So he will bring a view about the sector from that brokerage and the opportunity for launching around the globe. Alan, I cannot see you just now. You're online. Oh. Yes, I see you now. Thank you, Alan. The floor is yours.
Thanks, Betty. I hadn't actually prepared some slides, but since everyone else is using slides, I put some together fairly quickly. It's not letting me do it though. Ah, here we go. Can you see my slides okay?
Yes.
Great. So, yeah, thank you to the ACCESS.SPACE Alliance for this opportunity. Just a quick overview of CST. We are a launcher broker, or at least that's what we're best known for. But we started as a consultancy in the early 80s and became launch brokers as well slightly later on when we formed our Moscow office in the early 90s. And this is just an overview of some of the main services that CST provides. Most of what I'm hoping that we can talk about are some of the results, or at least I can stitch into this panel discussion, of some of the results of some of the consultancy projects that we've been doing in the first quarter of this year. But just before that, this is just an overview of some of the launches that we've done. We've assisted the launch of 82 small satellites so far. CST specializes in catering to small satellites, roughly 25 kilos and above. As for CubeSats, we've dealt with customers like Planet fairly recently. So we deal with CubeSats traditionally in sort of cluster formations, but we have dealt with individual ones as well. In terms of where CST sits in the launch brokerage landscape, fairly humble when it comes to numbers of small satellites that have been launched, but in terms of the mass, we're fairly good. This is quite an old slide, and these figures have almost certainly changed. But just to hit home with the idea that we focus more on small satellites than CubeSats for our brokering service. In terms of consultancy, CST's had a number of different customers, both private and government, over the years on all the different subjects. We generally take care of about 20 consultancy projects per year. It's just
to interrupt you. Could you please try to have a full screen or enlarge a bit your slides if you cannot have the presenter mode?
Apologies. It's full screen for me, but I guess it's not for you. Is that better? Sorry, you're on mute. But I assume
much
it's
better. Thank you.
Sorry about that. Just the final slide really leads me into what I'm hoping I can be of use on this panel for, which is when it comes to the subjects that CST's consultancy covers, it's fairly broad. We've done a lot of very specialized studies looking at reviewing particular technologies or particular aspects of the launch or small satellite markets. We've catered to insurance companies and government and private entities looking to understand strategic elements of either supply chains or markets. Most recently, we were asked to, and this is one of, or two of the 7 studies that we did in the first quarter of this year, were looking at some of the unique selling points of UK launch. And I know that this is something that's very relevant to this panel, both from customer sides such as Alex and SSTL, as well as the provider side such as Volodymyr and Precious Payloads. So this is something that when we were performing our research, we found that there's elephants in the room like SpaceX who are really performing a lot of providing a lot of downward pressure in terms of pricing pressure on the market with their rideshare programs, offering it comes down to about $5,000 per kilogram, to put it simplistically. But this is very competitive indeed. So in terms of direct price to price comparison, the UK is very hard pressed to compete with these kinds of prices for larger rideshare launch vehicles. But where we can capitalize is by looking at some of the gaps, let's say, that these various larger launch providers tend to exhibit, where various customers have to come up with compromises to fit within certain schedules and within certain primary payloads that they have to ride alongside. So looking at all of the SpaceX's and Soyuz's and other sort of larger rideshare launch providers of this world, looking at the various gaps where the UK with a small launch solution could capitalize is something that I hope we can talk about on this panel. It was certainly some of the interesting things that we found in our research in terms of shortening timelines between various stages of the launch provision process and various other stages as well that we can talk about later. Thanks, Betty.
Thank you very much, and I would like to invite now all the speakers to go in video mode so we can see you and be part of the panel. Basically, I think you've set up the scene and it goes in different directions. I will start with some of the questions from the audience, and Volodymyr, some of them are actually for you in relation to your activities in Scotland and how dependent you are from that site in Scotland and what the recent decisions of the consultation have impacted you. So if you can just answer and address that point, can you launch from somewhere? Someone was suggesting some other parts of the UK, but it could be abroad. And how is the decision in Scotland affecting you?
All right, so first of all, there are 3 locations in Scotland, right? So, and all of them are in a game, right? And to be honest, I'm not even, I don't know even what exactly what challenges we're talking about, because we face those challenges on a constant basis. All of them, right? However, as I mentioned before, we have a mobile launch complex. Technically, we can move to any location in Europe, and we proved this with one of our launches, which we did from Iceland. So most likely our second big launch will also happen in Iceland, even though that we continue to launch our smaller vehicles from Scotland still. And by the way, the last one we did last Friday. So just before the long weekend. So we know that is a challenge, and it will be the challenge. Even even if we go through the current one, it will be more and more and more. Then it will be regulations and so on and so on. It is difficult to do orbital launch in a country who never did this before, and we all understood this. All what we can do is to keep be flexible, be agile, and technologically smart, and be ready to go and fit whatever the future will bring us, to survive and execute. So far we did well. I'm absolutely positive that we will do this in the future. And of course we work with all European countries and US and Asian region for alternative locations, of course.
Thank you very much. I think that's a very important point that you're making. And actually, going from the launcher side, I would like to expand a bit the discussion about the concept that quite a few of you have expressed in terms of systems. And we sometimes talk of systems, if you want. I'm a systems engineer, so you like to make big systems of big systems in ecosystems and everything. But the question is, how do you see that happening between the four of you? Do you see something that where you have vertical integration, or something where you have more flexibility or reuse of software or hardware? Who wants to start answering on that? Maybe Alex, do you want to start? You on mute, Alex.
Sorry, yeah. So I can say a little bit about that. So for system of systems, this often comes down to the operators. So most of us on this panel, we are essentially service providers to an operator in the end who wants to fulfill a certain application. So it's usually the operator who has a grand vision of what they want to do. And often when it comes down to, say, big data systems, you may need to integrate information from different sources. Some of that comes from satellites, but some of it will undoubtedly come from other areas as well. If you're a communication service provider, you need to integrate your system probably with other systems. And so you need to make a system of systems and make all these different technologies work together. And often all these individual technologies are proven, they are available, but there's a lot of work involved that's often overlooked, which is the systems engineering of bringing all these things together and making it work seamlessly. That is, I think, the biggest challenge that is often overlooked. But it comes down to the operators.
Yes, and Andre, do you want to go a bit further on that? Because your view is more the reusability even of software concepts. So what's your view?
Sure, thanks. The way I look at it is that certainly, the pattern that we observe is that every company that enters the market wants to verticalize and say, we'll do everything. We'll do our own subsystems, we'll do integration, we'll do software and everything. And we only see that that's successful if you have the great team with a great experience, and also you have access to really good source of capital. A good example is Rocket Lab that said, hey, we'll verticalize. And they've proven it, right? They raised hundreds of millions of dollars, and they're doing that, right? But but that's not the reality for, let's say, Asian or European or Middle Eastern startups. And what I observe, the trend that I observe, is that a lot of suppliers, they now offer what we call a space as a service, which is, it's a further implementation of that model that they used to be a hosted payload solution. Now it's sort of rebranded and deepened as the space as a service, where you just provide a payload, a sensor, and then the rest till the MVP is done by one supplier. And I think that's the great model for the companies that are just entering the space industry. So I would really, really advise them not to try to verticalize, because that's the common trend, but that's not what you need to do at the early stage. I would really encourage them to adopt either a hosted payload solution or a space as a service solution, just to prove that their sensor can provide the data which is valuable enough for their customers.
Thank you very much, Andre. Alan, do you have a view, and in particular, the role of the launcher because there are different ways of looking at the integration, and the launcher is part of the system. Or what is your view, Alan?
Well, from what we've found in the industry, there seems to be more and more drive to try and standardize and streamline to reduce the cost of launch. So to try and remove the sort of the human element and make it as sort of automated as possible in terms of booking a slot on a rocket. And that works for the most part. I mean, the approach that SpaceX has taken with their commercial rideshare, which I mentioned earlier, is a very bare bones approach. So you get an incredible price, but certain overheads and other elements that you have to put team time, your own team's time into aren't factored. So the UK has a wonderful opportunity here to offer something a lot more well, vertically integrated in some areas and standardized in other areas to ease the journey and to reduce prices, but also to offer something a little more bespoke, a little more tailored to certain customers' needs. And again, this goes back to I think trying to go toe to toe with some of the larger vehicles that are offering such reduced prices would be, dare I say, folly. So yeah, a balance of both, standardizing where possible, but also looking at where certain customer needs require a certain human element or a certain sort of flexibility.
Volodymyr, what are you doing to cut your costs down and be competitive in the launcher market? What are your solutions?
Yeah,
what are your drivers?
That's a very, very good question. So our main driver, Alan's one of the favorite companies, which he mentioned a few times today, which is basically SpaceX, right? And we had to be smart to move our price down, which we do. And that unfortunately leads to this vertical integration, which we also was talking about. And we had to do everything in-house. We had to do 10 times cheaper than SpaceX will do. Had to use the modern cutting-edge technologies and materials and everything else. Had to create our own tools, which is, cutting-edge and world-best ones right now, to produce even cheaper, even faster, and so on. And this SpaceX, it's a company which was very, very difficult to compete, of course. And we also focus on a niche client. So obviously we cannot compete on a rideshare model. So we see SpaceX as a bus service. It's profitable when they have full bus full of passengers, but the passengers have to wait on a bus stop, and they can only get out from the bus on a certain bus stop, and they need to walk, right? Yes, the cost per ticket seems to be cheaper. However, the final cost for the passenger could be way more, right? Because it's time, it's a waste of time, it's waste of energy, and so on, which is absolutely relevant for the satellites. So, like Skyrora and Rocket Lab, for example, we are dedicated vehicles, so we provide different services. So to be honest, it's quite unfair to compare us with SpaceX, even though that we still do. So we are a taxi service which is capable to launch satellites. I'm not talking about the smaller satellites. I'm talking about the small sats, but not the cube ones. I'm talking about 100 kilos niche, which is the best niche for us. And I believe that as industry will mature, the taxi services will be in demand. So the businesses will start to appreciate the time and not receive delays in receiving revenue more than savings on so-called cost per kilo, which, by the way, even with SpaceX associated also with extra hidden costs, which you will not see on those systems, let's say, but you will face them only in realities. So anyway, we need to work smart in all fronts to compete with elephant in the room, which we do.
So working smart also includes some adaptability, and there was a question for you about looking at sea launches. So how do you address this aspect of a potential viable market? Because you can launch some larger satellites, some smaller satellites, some swarms of satellites or whatever. There is a bigger variety of satellite types that you would be launching. How are you adapting to that, and how are you adapting to potentially new sites such as sea launch? I don't know if that's a question from the audience. Is it something that you're thinking of?
Okay, that's once again, it's a very, very good question. So we in Skyrora promote the container-based solution. Containers could be placed on a C platform as well. So we in the team have the people who used to live, our head of tech in Ukraine spent 12 years on sea launch program. That was a program between Boeing and Norway and Ukraine, Zenit vehicle, roughly more than 30 launchers. And we know exactly what was good and what was bad, and what was the reason behind why the program finally been closed. So I know that there is a Germany is considering such kind of project. I also speaking with some Asian countries on this one. Yes, Skyrora is able and is willing and capable to support such kind of initiatives if it would be happy. But we don't have plan to build our own sea launch program. Our aim is to build a program which is capable to be launched from anywhere, including the sea platform. But I'm sure that Alan knows more, because I'm sure that you launched something on sea launch in the past, right? So you know better than me.
We certainly tried. It was from a submarine, and unfortunately the US government had issues with a former Soviet nuclear sub launching rockets.
Okay, so it's even cooler than sea launch. Okay, that's something probably we will discuss after that.
I did have something to add to that, Betty, if it's okay.
Go ahead.
Everything that Volodymyr said is very true. There are some good examples out there, such as sea launch, the former Ukrainian and Russian collaboration, and there's also obviously in terms of carrier vehicle or a mobile launch platform, let's say, and a carrier vehicle, there's air launch as well. So there's still Pegasus out there, and there's now coming onto the horizon Virgin Orbit. And we looked at these in some of our studies in the first quarter of this year, and from what we found, there's always this trade-off between, again, offering something that's fairly bespoke and tailored against something that really is cost-effective. And when you layer in the extra cost of a mobile launch platform, such as a ship or an oil platform or a plane, it really does translate into added costs and increased prices for the customer. So if you're let's say go for some more exotic launches, maybe some lower inclination launches, then where let's say the market is less serviced or addressed, then possibly it could make sense to have a mobile launch platform. But then again, there are some small launch vehicles out there that are looking at equatorial and low inclination launch from land. So you'd be competing with them on price as well. So it's a very difficult thing to balance.
So Alex, in satellites, you would have that adaptability that is required, and also a time element. So because maybe the market is moving in a way that everything needs to happen now. So what's your answer?
Yeah, so it's particularly complicated equation. Most customers, the most important thing to launch customers or end customers for systems who need a launch and a satellite, in the end it's price, because they have a business plan and they need to meet the business plan. They have a rough idea of what launch costs are, so they have something in their mind that they want to be able to do. And then as a secondary concern comes the thing about timeliness. Most business plans, it is important to get them launched on a certain time, but sometimes a few months here and there doesn't really make a big difference. But so price trumps everything. And then it is really all those other factors. It is what is the availability? How does that availability compare with what you can get on the buses that are going regularly with a whole bunch of satellites? If that is cheaper, often there is this sort of balance that they need to look at this trade. The question also increasingly is, if you have a business with a satellite, you probably, in most cases, need to put it somewhere very specifically. And there is the added requirement is that most business is done with multiple satellites. There's very few businesses that you can do these days with one satellite. And so you have to launch several. And does it make sense if you launch one and you launch another one next, but that's a launch failure? You may not have a business. So there's many quite complex considerations that come into selecting a launch strategy in the end that goes with those satellites. And often that plays into the business cases. So what we see is often customers really struggling with all those conflicting requirements, because in their mind it is just price, but there are a lot of other considerations. And the one thing we haven't mentioned here is things like regulatory issues. Some of it comes down to shipping your satellite to two different countries. That introduces time and complexity. Not that much cost, but there can be complexities involved in that, and you need to be experienced in order to do that. And this is a good example of what we have done with CST, with Alan's company, is actually launching from Russia. It turned out to be very complicated, but once you know, and if you know what you're doing, you can actually navigate that complexity. So it's not price, it is all those, as you say, a lot of the hidden issues that come out that you need to consider as well then.
Andre, because you come from a different sector in software development, what are the similarities in trends, and what would be the specificities of the space sector that you had to face in this new venture?
I would, just endorse both Alex and Alan for what they said, because, the key point of my presentation was that, the hidden cost of managing the risks beyond that price tag from SpaceX is what actually matters these days, because we can see that, a lot of companies, they just jump on that opportunity. Oh, I want to fly with SpaceX and make a PR statement out of that. But then they end up, of course, working, across multiple time zones, and they don't know how to ship the satellite out of their country and then import to California. So exactly to the same point that the way we as a software company are providing a solution for that is that companies that go through us to look at the launch market are able to see all this hidden cost of how it's going to look like in terms of management. So how I'm going to manage that mission from a regular perspective, from the third-party liability insurance, from the ITU and the NOAA and all of this licensing regime, and also like a mundane task of shipping your satellite to another country. Let's say you jump on the goods deal with a broker, but then you have to understand that in order for you to fulfill the mission, you have to ship your satellite, let's say in my case, from United Arab Emirates to Germany for the integration, then from Germany to Russia for the mating with the launch vehicle, or with the dispenser of the broker, and then finally to Kazakhstan. And you have to manage it. If you want to be presented at all of this, you have to apply for visas and apply for, to get all the paperwork done in order for your team to go and hop on all those intermediate steps before you're able to finally have your satellites go to orbit. So we're just attacking that from the software perspective and just building it in the templates that we distribute to the community.
So another question and another angle that I would like to address with you that is very important for the sustainability of space is actually the management of space debris. So if you have some comments, what are you doing in your own instances? How are you addressing that issue? And maybe if I start now with Alex. Alex, how would you react to the space debris issue?
Yeah, so as I said in my sort of presentation, it's a very interesting topic. We've so far been involved in 2 missions that actually try and develop some technologies for space debris. So the Remove Debris mission for the European Union was very interesting. It developed various technologies for removing defunct spacecraft from orbit. And you can find videos on YouTube on that particular mission. We also recently were involved in the LCD mission with Astroscale, and Astroscale, of course, is trying to do this on a commercial basis. So the reason for debris becoming an issue, the one reason is because there are so many more satellites going up. I mean, last year we had 1,000 satellites launched in a year. It's 5 years ago it was 100, so we've gone up a factor of 10. It looks like it's going to stay, but actually that creates potential business for companies to clean up as well. So from our company perspective, yes, you have to certainly take this into account, because otherwise you don't have a business. So debris is very important from that point of view, and you make sure that you can include technologies on your spacecraft to automatically remove it from orbit at the end of life, pacify it, etc. But it creates opportunities, commercial opportunities for those satellites where that cannot be done for whatever reason. You can't build a system that's 100% reliable, so there will be some stragglers that need to be removed from orbit. The other element that's becoming very interesting from a debris perspective is just from a launcher perspective, is the launch windows. What we're seeing increasingly is launch windows actually decreasing because there are so many objects up there that you need to take account with if you're launching your own launch and satellites. So that actually creates some limitations in the end. So it hits all aspects of the space business. So it is a very important area to look at and to consider as part of sort of sustainable space environment.
Thank you. And maybe Volodymyr, you want to react to what Alex has said, both in terms of your own sustainability. So are you taking some specific actions about your launcher in terms of space debris management, and what does it mean for your own launches if you have restricted windows, so for instance? So what's your view?
Yeah, I would like to absolutely support Alex on this matter, right? I would like to highlight that I think it's more than a half satellites which right now on orbits are 40 ones, so which is basically something which we should take care about. And all the future which we all believe, new space future, thousands and thousands of satellites on orbit and so on, would not be possible without us to solve the problem of debris, right? We in Skyrora, the only, for my knowledge, of course, vehicle which has this three-stage design, which I showed, I don't want to repeat myself, but we are the only one who are capable to do replacement services, deployment of the satellites, and at the same time, deorbit the 40 satellites, which I hope will be a good in demand for even for constellations like OneWeb, for example. You know, they do the initial push, of course, with the large vehicles, and then they need to replace the 40 ones, which unfortunately would happen, right? At least 1% or whatever, 0.1% would happen. On those numbers, it's of thousands of satellites, it's a big number. So we built our technology in taking in mind this need, and especially in the future. And we all know the regulations getting tighter, so the regulator will put in place and the launch satellite operator will be responsible for the orbit as well. So that is our way how we contribute. And of course, what makes us unique, because that is orbital, we call it space stack vehicles, it is actually our third stage, it is actually part of the vehicle. It's not just additional payloads which you will find on other vehicles, but it's actually the core vehicle which would make us unique. And we obviously trying to minimize debris which we produce and impact which we produce, and as well as helping our customers to solve this issue and help our planet.
Alan, are you working on space debris or these issues, or how do you take that into consideration in your brokerage activity or your consulting activities?
With regard to our brokerage activity, I feel very guilty in saying that there's little that we're involved in terms of space debris, and that's simply because the nature of our particular brokerage service. We leave that responsibility with the launch provider and well, more with the customer. We're there. We don't have a dispenser, at least not yet, or any kind of hardware. We focus on negotiation and management services. But on the consultancy side, this was actually this goes very much in line with what Volodymyr has just said about in-orbit sync. We found that when assessing the various markets that a UK launch could have a very valuable niche in, supplying in-orbit services is certainly one of them. It's something where if there's a satellite that's become a particularly big risk, as Volodymyr said, there are many that are faulty, there are many that are just completely dead and really do pose quite a risk. So if something becomes a really, really big risk and needs to be removed at very short notice, then a flexible launch solution that I see no reason why it can't be offered from the UK. Could be a lucrative market. So that we've had a look at it in that respect.
Andre, I don't know if you want in 30 seconds,
Sure.
because I know the time is running. So your view on space debris and sustainability.
Sure. I just wanted to add from, again, the software perspective, we built and delivered two simple tools that are free to be used by our clients. One is the free and immediate orbit lifetime approximation. And the second is the orbital debris mitigation report, which are both automated. They just capture the day of submission, and you're able to just download these reports and estimations as a PDF and submit it to your regulator. So it's very simple.
Thank you very much. I think we're getting close to an end to our session. So I would like to thank SSTL for the sponsorship of this session. Thank all of you, Alan Webb, Andre Maximov, Alex da Silva Curiel, and Volodymyr Levikin for your participation in that very exciting session. It's setting up the scene, it's putting things together, it's looking at systems of systems, and it's addressing issues across the whole space sector. So I hope the audience enjoyed listening to you. I did a lot, and I look forward to speaking to you at other times. And in the meantime, Tony, the floor is yours for your next session. Thank you.
Thanks, Betty.
Thank you to the
Thanks.
panelists. Thank you for joining us, and thanks to the attendees who have watched this panel.